Game over, man. Game over.
You're gonna need a bigger boat. So serious.
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome to episode 602 for September 15th, 2024, and I'm Jada Duran.
And I'm Brendan Cassidy.
Hey, thanks for joining us this week, everybody. We have a full slate in front of us, but to begin this week's show, everyone join me in a rousing happy birthday
Don't
to
sing,
Brendan.
come on. Can you just program a little applause in your sound patch or something? That might be a little bit better.
Yeah, I do have one here. I'm not exactly sure where it is, to be honest. I should have
You're
looked
just going
this
to keep
up
pressing
ahead of time.
buttons and finding sound
Yeah,
patches
like,
that make
oh wait,
sense.
hold on, I think I found it. Happy birthday, Brendan.
Okay, that's better. That's better. That's cute. I'll take that one. Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. So yeah, happy birthday.
Yeah, because you start singing, it's like all of a sudden the awkward silence is just going to take over the podcast when there's only two of us here. Because I'm not going to sing to myself. I'm just not that kind of person.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. But I am excited to be here, spending a few hours with you on your birthday. Now that you're 27, I think you are now. So
Oh, you're funny. You're really funny. You know that. On your
know.
last birthday, did you get the gift of becoming a comedian? Is that what that was?
Yeah, exactly. You turn 39 and you just delve right into comedy. It's the only way to cope with getting old. So
I guess that's fair. Not too far off from that. 35. So I'm only 4 years behind you at this point. So I cannot wait to become a comedian myself in just 3 or 4 years.
Just wait a few years. You'll start thinking about death more. And the only way to get over that hurdle is to laugh.
I guess I have to have kids first. That's the first thing.
Having kids. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. We have a slate of topics that we're going to delve into. We don't really have a specific quote unquote main topic as we typically do.
Kind of a
we have
news
a lot to
episode
talk
in
about.
some ways.
Absolutely. And first, as we have done this year, especially over the summer, let's start things off with, is the parade on or off? And by that, we're talking about the box office. Is the theatrical experience dead or alive? And for a long time, it looked like it was going to be the death of cinema. However, the box office over the last few weeks have been quite interesting. We, of course, have to talk about Beetlejuice, which topped the box office once again this last weekend with, 51.6 million in its second weekend. Not too shabby. Not too shabby. And it did not have much competition. Because
That is true. That is true.
the long-awaited Speak No Evil remake finally, and I think what's so hilarious, Brendan, what's so funny, there was so many jokes and memes and laughs to be had about the incessant marketing for Speak No trailer, the Speak No Evil trailer, excuse me.
Speak no trailer.
Which-
You're at a point
yeah,
now
I
where it's like, I no longer speak of
we
this
don't want to
trailer,
speak
please.
about the trailer exactly. My subconscious
funny.
really coming out there, but we have not. We've all seen this trailer a bazillion times.
That's true.
and we've
Yeah,
all laughed
yeah.
and joked about it. And I just find it funny that they put that trailer in front of us for weeks and months for it to only garner $11.5 million.
And it wasn't it the same trailer every single time, if I'm not
I
mistaken?
think they switched it up eventually. There was a second trailer that dropped.
So it wasn't like Argyle, which just played the same trailer
same
over
one
and
over-
over again. And when we talked about that movie when it came out earlier this year, we thought, okay, could that actually be a pretty sound marketing tactic by just replaying the same trailer over and over again, which in a way is sort of what Speak No Evil was trying to do, just with slightly different marketing visuals to accommodate not one but two trailers, I guess. Well, if that was the intent, to just keep replaying these things over and over again, it didn't seem to bode well very much for that for those numbers as you're talking about.
Not at all. Now, to be fair, the budget for the film was only $15 million. So it doesn't have to do a whole lot to make its money back. Worldwide, it's actually over the mark, the budget mark that is, and it sits around close to $21 million worldwide. Now, the question is, how much does it cost to play the same trailer over and over and over again for months? How much does that cost?
Well, how much does that cost? How much does that factor into the budget, if at all? Because sometimes it can, sometimes it doesn't. And in this case, 21 million that it made worldwide over a $15 million budget, as you're talking about. That's not a huge jump above budget. It really isn't.
Well, the marketing budgets tend to be a separate expenditure. So it's $15 million plus whatever the marketing is. And I don't know how much marketing it did beyond the trailers. I wasn't paying too much attention, if I'm being perfectly honest, but I don't feel like I saw anything aside from seeing that trailer a gazillion times. Yeah. So I don't know. Like the marketing budget still could have been limited.
Well, yeah, I bring that up to say that even if it is somehow intertwined with that, I mean, that's more or less why we often say for a movie to technically break even, it needs to make, like 3 times its budget or something like that, because it's trying to make up for what those marketing expenditures could potentially be. But in this case, with Speak No Evil, the fact that it's really not much above its actual reported budget, this movie's going to sink pretty quickly. I don't expect it to do very well in the coming weekends. This is not the kind of thing where we try to estimate what kind of legs it's going to have. Yeah. This is technically not going to be a profitable hit.
No, not at all. Not at all. We'll see, though, if there's any word of mouth. I don't necessarily want to fall victim to that again. We've come to this a couple of times, dubious. Yeah. And the film ended up having legs. So you just never know. You never know. I haven't seen much, at least in terms of social media, that would spark or suggest that it will have word of mouth and therefore its second weekend will be significant. I simply have not seen that. So I don't suspect that's going to happen. And you're right. I think Speak No Evil is going to lose out, and we'll see it on VOD in 2 weeks' time.
Have you seen the original, the Danish film from 2020?
I don't think I have. I think that was a blind spot for me. For whatever reason, I did not keep up with it.
I know it has an audience for sure, but I feel like that audience is mostly, our circle and not really those who are going to seek out this particular movie. Yeah. It always tends to be the problem when English language remakes of foreign language films come out. It's because the audience is so questionable. Yeah. It's such a questionable audience. How do you who is the audience in that way? Because those that actually know and love the foreign language version are going to be cynical about an English spoken version. And unless the marketing does a good job catering to a new demographic, then it's going to sink in. It's going to sink in its first weekend.
Yeah, I've never really understood the idea of turning a foreign language film into an American remake, because the people that see those foreign films, it's not a wide American audience.
No.
And I mean, there might be a few that slip through the cracks. You have something like Parasite, of course, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, the films that end up becoming major Oscar players in a significant way.
Sure.
Like, I don't even know if I would say something like the Edward Berger film from a few years ago. That ended up getting a couple of Oscars aside from foreign language. But would you really consider All Quiet to be a film that broke through in a major way?
Not really. No.
Would require an American remake, like remaking Force Majeure. Who is that for?
There was, there was a period where I felt like it, and this is not to give credit to the movement of English spoken remakes of foreign language films. It's not what I'm doing, but it sort of made sense for Hollywood to try to do that back in like the mid to late 2000s when we saw more foreign language films actually have that kind of popularity. Let's say something like Pan's Labyrinth, for instance.
Sure.
Or now they obviously didn't try that with Pan's Labyrinth, and thank goodness they never
Yeah, and
did.
thank
but,
God, yeah.
Yeah, but there was a moment when I felt like movies like Pan's Labyrinth and Amelie and The Lives of Others and The Diving Bell and the Butterfly were a bit more top of mind, even outside just critics groups. And there was potential for Hollywood to bank, or at least try to bank on that, and it didn't work. So it's interesting that they just keep doing that.
No, I mean, absolutely. Such as The Killer, the John Woo,
the John Woo
remake
film,
that
yeah.
just came out. How many people outside of our circles even knew that was a remake?
Yeah, and that's interesting. That's his own remake too.
That's his own remake. It wasn't really marketed, and from what I could tell, even the little that was there, that wasn't even a point of emphasis. So it's interesting to think about how things have shifted. Honestly, I feel like if you're going to do that, it simply needs to exist on Netflix.
Yeah,
because people will watch movies on Netflix, and maybe they don't even know that it's an American remake of a foreign language film, but that's usually where I feel like that could find some success. That's certainly not going to be at the box office these days.
It seemed like the kind of thriller that you would find as a Netflix original if you did some digging for it. Speak No Evil, specifically, the new one. And I've heard decent things. I mean, the review aggregations for it are not terrible. I'm actually seeing some pretty decent buzz for it. It just comes down to the marketing for it. The audience, or turning an audience for it, was a very difficult process because it's hard to target that.
I agree. And I mean, I guess to be fair to the marketing for Speak No Evil, well, not that I paid too close attention, because I didn't, if I'm being perfectly honest, but from what I could tell, they didn't really announce that this was an American remake. They simply marketed
they just kind of threw it out
a
there.
horror film
With
that stars James McAvoy. And that probably was the right approach. Horror does very well, generally. So it's interesting that this is a horror film that isn't doing quite well, but it just happens to also be an American remake of a foreign film. So I don't know.
I think it all just comes down to not being a very well marketed film, because I mean, there is room to make this a hit if it was just advertised right.
Yeah, I mean, and I think if you're going to do it, it needs to be done with someone that already has some sort of like a vivid fan base. I think of something like Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, right? Because now you're talking about a filmmaker that has a fan base, and also you're talking about a filmmaker that generally has a strong vision, that gets great performances, that makes really good movies. The Force Majeure remake, on the other hand, and many others that like it, are simply done, for the sake of it. Where hire for director, you get a good cast perhaps, but there's really no vision behind it. They're simply doing it to try to cash in on something.
Yeah, but you make a great point with the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, which could have fallen into the same trappings, but I'm looking it up now. That was a fairly modest box office hit in totality, from what I understand. I think it ended up making around 230 million worldwide with a budget of only 90 million.
Yeah, that's good.
Which is not bad. Yeah. So in a way, it kind of proves your point by having the right talent involved. And well, also, let's just look at it from a marketing standpoint. The trailer for The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo was a work of art on its own. That is one of the greatest teaser trailers I've ever seen. And that may have been the thing that sold the movie. The tagline sold the movie. The feel bad movie for Christmas. And that's a way to get people in.
Exactly. I agree. The marketing was great. And it's, of course, Fincher. It's Daniel Craig at the height of his James Bond fame. Rooney Mara is fantastic. So that is a film that had a lot of appeal. Even if you're not familiar with the foreign version of it, you simply see, David Fincher has a new movie coming out, and it's with Daniel Craig and Rooney Mara. I could see that working on its own terms.
that also had a popular book series to support it, regardless if you
Sure.
knew about the Swedish version that existed in 2009 prior to that. The book series by
Yeah.
Stieg Larsson was actually really well known, so that also helped support it too.
For sure. So maybe that's not quite an apples to apples comparison, but
Mhm.
my point in that is to say, I still think the success of that film comes down to the notion that they hired a filmmaker that is
hired the right
known
people.
for craft and
Yeah.
making appealing movies that people like to
Mhm.
see. And at that time, was that just off the heels of the Social Network, right? So, and you
Yes, that was 1 year later.
yeah, 1 year later. So you think about the huge success of that film. That
Yeah.
certainly has a part of it, and I'm not exactly sure. I assume he made Girl with the Dragon Tattoo like immediately after, if they came out back to back years.
Mm-hmm.
So hiring Fincher to make that movie with the assumption that the Social Network was probably going to be successful was a smart idea, was a smart choice.
That's a fair point.
And I just feel like a lot of these American remakes, and look, that could also have been a Fincher thing. Like he wanted to do that property. But either way, however the road is laid out, oftentimes these American remakes don't have a David Fincher. They have
they
directors
don't.
for hires a lot of the time.
And if we look at some of the best American remakes of foreign language films, they're usually from people with directorial talent in a way, such as The Magnificent Seven, if we go all the way back there, or the movie Let Me In, which is a great remake of Let the Right One In. Matt Reeves did some really
that's
good
a great
stuff with
one.
that movie.
Yeah, exactly.
The Ring, Gore Verbinski had a very unique look for Ringu, so there was no like the best examples I think are ones that actually utilized the right type of talent. And say what you will about The Departed, Martin Scorsese obviously directed a huge hit of his adaptation of Infernal Affairs. So you're right. It really depends on who you get behind the camera, who you get on screen, and how you create your own unique interpretation of that people are going to want to see regardless of their association with the original material.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, nothing against James Watkins, who wrote and directed Speak No Evil, but that's not a name that's going to be a draw. Like nobody really knows who that is.
No. Eden Lake is a good movie, but no one really knows about the director behind that movie, even if they have seen it.
No, exactly.
I think they'll remember that Michael Fassbender was in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. They might have seen The Woman in Black, but I don't know if
But-
that's a name that's going to stick around.
But they'll think of that, that one horror movie that featured Harry Potter, right? That's probably the only thing they'll think about. Yeah.
Exactly. 100%.
Yeah.
At any rate, that is to say, American remakes, the whole idea, I think, is a little
Weird.
a little iffy. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
quite dubious on the whole idea to begin with. As it relates to the box office, one other thing that I want to note real quick, and then we can move on.
Mm-hmm.
So Borderlands finished its theatrical run. And I wanted to note this because, again, the budget for it was $110 million, reportedly. $110 million. It ends its theatrical run worldwide with $32.6 million. That is
I
major
feel so
yikes.
bad laughing at that. I really do,
Yeah.
because that is like I actually, in a way, I feel bad for Eli Roth and the rest of the team involved with that. That is sad. That is really, really bad.
Really, really bad. Yeah, I haven't seen it, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people that have seen it have nothing but horrible things to say about it. I don't know if I've heard a positive thing about Borderlands.
Geez, you think that would sell
So-
the movie?
You know, and maybe that's why it could find some audiences as it hits VOD, if it is indeed something you can laugh at because it's so bad.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Maybe
Is it the right kind
that
of
will-
bad?
But I don't know.
There is a right kind of bad sometimes.
There is.
Yeah.
There absolutely is. We'll see how that unfolds as it hits the VOD
Man.
market. But
Man.
yeah,
Yeah.
I wanted to note that because I saw that disparity earlier and
Yeah.
I could not help myself. That was such a wild gap there.
I want to look at the numbers in totality for the rest of the year. Is that the biggest bomb of the year? It has to be. It
It's
has
up
to
there.
be.
It's got to be. It's
Yeah.
absolutely got to be. All right, switching gears, we're going to take a hard left turn here, and we're going to talk about James Earl Jones, the man, the myth, the legend, the alumni of the greatest university in the world, the University of Michigan, of course. I'm speaking.
That's right.
about.
That's right. He's a Wolverine.
He's a Wolverine through and through, and we love him for it. The great James Earl Jones. He, of course, passed away last week at the age of 93. Talk about a legendary career. Absolutely legendary. I don't even know where to begin with this one. Now, there's, of course, James Earl Jones, the great actor who we've seen in a ton of things. Then there's James Earl Jones, the iconic figure that is foundational to the history of cinema.
Yeah.
When it comes to something like Star Wars and his relation with Darth Vader, of course,
For
or
sure.
even the legendary performance he gives as Mufasa in The Lion King, which is heralded as one of the best animated films of all time and launched Disney to a whole new stratosphere as they were veering into the 90s.
Yeah.
And,
It's
and really
such
turning
an
the corner.
it's such an iconic voice that even when Disney decided to do a quote unquote live action remake of The Lion King, when it came to the casting of Mufasa, they all thought, just get James Earl Jones back. Like, we can't do better than that.
They didn't even try to replace
They did
him.
not even
Yeah.
try, which in a weird way is one of the film's biggest problems, but we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about how James Earl Jones, on one hand, was probably one of the greatest, if not the greatest voice in all of Hollywood.
Yeah.
To the point that it was almost a running gag for many talk shows and comedians out there. I don't know if you saw some of the tributes that went viral, JD, but a lot of them back when David Letterman was still hosting The Late Show, he used to do a nightly top 10, and one of his categories involved like the best things that would be uttered by James Earl Jones.
Yeah.
And obviously, I'm not going to quote them now. You can go and find it on YouTube. It's a really, really funny sketch. And I think he did it a few times, but only James Earl Jones himself can do those things justice. It just goes to show how like you hear that voice and you know him instantaneously. It was so crucial to the trajectory of what voice acting meant in Hollywood.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I don't want to. I know we can talk about his career outside of Star Wars and The Lion King, but his voice is so distinct and vivid and appealing that his work as Darth Vader over the years, it's iconic for a reason.
It is.
And people love to hear it. You immediately associate his name with that character. And yeah, you cannot tell the history of cinema without that character and without his vocal performance. And the same with Mufasa. Like his vocal performance in that film absolutely slays me. It is phenomenal. I think Disney, I have criticized it. I don't think it's great. Him coming back to do The Lion King, they probably should have recast that character.
Probably.
But his performance in that original Lion King is truly legendary. It truly is one of the best vocal performances in any animated film I've ever heard. It's phenomenal.
It's one of the most formative vocal performances I think I've ever encountered when getting into movies at a young age, because as a kid in 1993, when The Lion King came out in 1994, but the year before that was The Sandlot in 1993, and those two films were huge childhood staples for me, especially when The Lion King first came out. And I remember rewatching The Sandlot maybe a year or two removed from when The Lion King came out and realizing hey, the man at the end of this movie, his voice sounds familiar. Why is that? And then I realized it was Mufasa. And I think that was the moment I realized that voice performances can sometimes be done by very recognizable actors and people. So it was almost like this formative moment for me when it came to how casting in movies works between live action and animation, and how crucial each medium is for its own reasons. That was a learning experience for me.
Absolutely. The Lion King obviously came out a year later, and that would that was my first interaction with James Earl Jones, Mufasa, in that film. But as I got a little bit older, The Sandlot did become one of those films I also grew up with and associated him with that film, and he's great in his little role there. I absolutely love it. And then as I got into high school, Field of Dreams became a significant
That's another great one.
I had.
That's another
what a
great
performance in that film. He's so great. I absolutely love him in that. So
he's got a good sense of humor too. Sorry to cut you off on that, but I do want to go back to this story about the Sandlot. I heard this interview that Patrick Renna, who played Ham Porter in the Sandlot, was giving pretty recently, or maybe it was something that he did a couple of years ago, and it just happened to be recirculating now that James Earl Jones has sadly passed. But he said when all of the kids on set for the Sandlot met James Earl Jones, it was originally meant that all of them would have a scene with him, but then it only ended up being the two main kids and no one else. But when some of them went up to introduce themselves, they're like, "Oh my God, you're Darth Vader." And I think he replied by saying, "No, I am your father."
That's so good.
Yeah. I gotta find that interview, but it's just he
is funny.
He was funny. He was a really funny guy. He was so self-aware about his status, or at least his vocal status in Hollywood, and I appreciated that. I like that.
Yeah. I love that self-awareness as well. Lean into it. You have such a distinct, legendary voice. You might as well take advantage of it.
There's nothing conceited about that in his case. He's earned it. He's earned it for sure.
He's absolutely loved. Yeah. But I also think of, and obviously I would have caught up with this film much later. I think I was in college, but his performance in something like The Great White Hope comes to mind. I saw a bunch of people talking about that one as well. I know he's done a bunch of stuff outside of these legendary roles. I do think they are legendary for a reason. That's why I did not want to diminish them. I saw people immediately go for the films outside of the cliche Star Wars and Lion King, but I do want to champion it because I think, again, you can't tell the story of cinema without them, and I think that reputation is wholeheartedly earned. And
I agree.
To what we were just saying about leaning into that, I think in this instance we really can lean into it. Those performances truly are legendary, but I think his work in something like The Great White Hope is really great as well.
I agree.
I think he's fantastic in that film.
Yeah. Small roles here and there, even in things that weren't technically cinema. I remember as a kid, my household, sometimes for Easter, we would watch this miniseries called Jesus of Nazareth that he had a small role in that also featured many great actors like Michael York and Anne Bancroft, among many others. So he was very busy in the world of Hollywood. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, doesn't he have a small role in Dr. Strangelove?
He does. No, he does. Yeah, that was another one I was going to bring up as well.
Yeah.
Isn't it the sequence in the plane?
Yeah.
As they're like dropping the bomb. I think that's where he is in that film.
Yeah.
So it's not a huge role, but still, he's working with.
But again, he still has that voice. So you hear a classic, voice like that in a film that really has nothing to do with that voice. It's all of a sudden, Dr. Strangelove becomes a Star Wars movie.
In hindsight, absolutely. Yeah. I just love anytime that he was on screen or we were hearing his voice through narration, it simply brings a smile to your face. You love to hear him. And we'll miss him. We'll absolutely miss him.
We will.
The one other thing that I wanted to bring up in relation to James Earl Jones, and speaking of his work as Darth Vader, so there's now going to be a lot of debate about his future with Star Wars, because I do believe, I don't really recall the details here, I do think he signed some sort of a deal with Disney that they could use his voice as that character even after he passes. So if I'm not mistaken, that does exist. But the question remains, should Disney do this? They might have the ability to, going back to you, Jurassic Park. We have the ability to do this, but should we do this?
It's such a
I think
Yeah.
there needs to be a discussion around Star Wars just moving on from that character. altogether.
There are a lot of factors here, and I think in order to have a really solid, educated conversation on this, we really need to read the fine print of these contracts and what it means. Because on one hand, I think of it from James Earl Jones's perspective. I mean, what if it's a situation where he wants to find ways to provide for his family even after he has passed, and maybe this is one outlet for that. But at the same time, the artistic question comes into play. Isn't it time that we can move away from these characters and these old stories, especially for an overarching world like Star Wars?
Yeah.
And then you also run the risk of the AI aspect of it, because I think in this case, it's James Earl Jones signing this contract that allows the likeness of his voice to create new dialogue for this character,
Yeah.
which is very different than, let's say, a few years ago when Toy Story 4 came out. Don Rickles, who voiced Mr. Potato Head, had passed, but they had existing dialogue that he recorded that never got used that they were able to reincorporate into the film. So it was a bit different in that regard. So
Yes.
when the AI aspect comes into play, then you open the doors for more things like this that could be even worse. And that's it. There are so many different factors here. I don't want to give an opinion, but it does, from an artistic standpoint, there is something to worry about, we'll simply say.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's not as if you're completely using archival
Right.
footage, or in this case, audio, to recreate that voice. That could be part of it, as we saw with Rogue One. I'm okay with them using archival footage
Same.
in order to, help the creative process. But the moment you start invoking a likeness that involves AI, and especially what we see in terms of the actual visuals, going back to Rogue One as another example there. And with Darth Vader, he has the aesthetic that, it doesn't require the visuals.
That's
Still,
it. Yeah.
But still, we're talking about using AI to, I assume AI or whatever sound programs
I think it's a Ukrainian company. I forget the name of it, but I think that's what they do. They utilize old, not even archival, but old audio, and they try to create new dialogue from the likeness of that audio. I think that's what it does. So in this case, it is more about recreation and new verbiage from that's really not spoken by anyone in particular. And that's a very different thing.
I completely agree. So, I think at this point, we simply need to let him rest. I'm always going to side with that. If it's a character that we're going to see on screen, recast the role. I will always go back to, it's okay if you recast the role.
It's okay to recast, yeah.
Yeah. And in this case, if you're going to bring back Darth Vader, and I know that it is iconic and we only associate James Earl Jones with the character. So if that is going to be too much of a hurdle, retire the character. And here's the thing. James Earl Jones's death is going to be a catalyst for that on one hand. The other side of that, it's time that we move away from these characters anyway. I think Star Wars needs to find, no pun intended here, it needs to find a new voice with new characters. It's a whole galaxy that we can explore. We don't have to be stuck with the Skywalkers, with Darth Vader, with this very small pocket of the galaxy. Let's move beyond that and create something new. I think that's where Star Wars needs to go anyway, if we're just talking about the creative process broadly. And then you couple that with the passing of James Earl Jones, and I think that simply, I think, gives more heft to the idea that
Yeah.
Disney just needs to move away from this.
Yeah, I agree. And we've seen that many times, not even just with Star Wars, quite a few times, actually. We can trace this all the way back to Rogue One 8 years ago as we're recording this.
Yeah. Yeah.
But even recently with Alien Romulus, the utilization of, we'll say, a certain character just for not spoiling anything at this point. It's still a pretty new movie.
Yeah. Sure.
But we've seen something rather similar, and it does raise a question of the necessity of that. And I think Star Wars is at a place where the reliance on the familiar is actually hurting it. I really do think it is. And the best things that they've done, most people would agree, I think the best thing that they've done probably since something like The Force Awakens, for many, probably even something like the prequels or even The Empire Strikes Back, is Andor. And that feels fresh and new and different. And that should be evidence of trying to retire certain things that worked before and focus on new things.
I agree. And I think we're at a place now where Star Wars especially, I mean, that whole franchise is completely stuck in the mud at the moment and has been for some years.
Yeah.
I don't think you need to complicate it further by, playing in some sort of ethically murky sandbox.
Mm-hmm.
Whether that be with Peter Cushing or now James Earl Jones. You can move away from
in a way,
those characters.
Carrie Fisher, but that was also like that was very the circumstances there were very different given the mid-production process of The Rise of Skywalker, or what ended up becoming The Rise of Skywalker. So I certainly understand the difference there. But even so, it's Star Wars doesn't need more controversy at this point.
No, it does not. No, it does not. I think it's time to move on. So we'll leave it at that. Let James Earl Jones rest in peace, and may he, because what he gave us was absolutely legendary. We love him for it, and he got to live a long and incredible life. And go blue.
93. That's amazing.
Go blue, James Earl Jones.
Absolutely. Yeah.
All right, let's talk about audiobooks. I love a good audiobook.
Reading, listening. It's
listening. It's
stories.
Great for the soul.
We like stories. It is.
Absolutely.
It is. Makes you smarter too.
Exactly. That's why we love Audible. I'm a big champion for Audible. I use it weekly in my life.
Yeah.
Depending on the time of the year, it is a daily occurrence. I love checking out some books on Audible, and they have everything, right? They have over 150,000 titles to choose from. If you're a fan of J.R.R. Tolkien and you want to read Lord of the Rings, as I'm doing, that's on there as well. It's fantastic. We're going to talk some Harry Potter on this show. You can check out the Harry Potter books, as I've done a couple of times over the last few years.
Yeah, a few times. You've read them a few times now, haven't you?
I have.
Yeah.
Or if you want to get something relating to business, entrepreneurship, marketing, something along those lines, Audible has that covered as well. I actually just got done reading a marketing book for my day job. So Audible is a great resource. It has all kinds of great stuff up there that you got to go.
It's so diverse, so versatile. I'm actually in the process of reading, or I should say listening to, this Maris. My wife wants me to be reading these books, but by Sarah J. Maas, is a book series called A Court of Thorns and Roses, which I don't know if you've heard of. It's sort of lumped into the romantasy subgenre.
Sure.
It's the best way to put it. But she has me reading that. But weirdly, I think I can only stomach it if I'm actually listening to it in a proper setting. So Audible's making that certainly more palatable for me, for something that might not be quite in my wheelhouse. That's what makes Audible so great, is the ability to listen to something that actually has dramatic value if it might not be your thing. And that's really exciting.
And that's what I love about it, because time is precious, and I sadly just don't have the tangible time to sit on a couch and pull up a hard book and actually read it. I just don't have the time with 2 kids and all the jobs and hockey that I'm playing, everything that makes up my life. It's hard to just find time to sit on a couch and read a book. However, I'm in my car enough or I'm walking with my kids that I can, listen to an audiobook. It's very, very convenient, and Audible does such a great job. So you got to go check out Audible. Go to Audible Trial. That's Audible, TRIAL.com/InSession Film. And you'll get a free audiobook and a 30-day free trial. I mean,
yeah, absolutely.
That is an amazing gift.
I agree.
One free audiobook, a 30-day free trial. It just doesn't get any better than that. Again, go to audibletrial.com/InSession Film to get that free audiobook and that 30-day free trial. You're going to love it. We thank Audible for their support. All right, Brennan, let's talk about t-shirts and swag. And
I love it.
How
you're wearing some right now. You're looking more fashionable than I am. I'm in the collared shirt, but it has no InSession Film logo anywhere. So I'm losing this game right now.
Yeah, I got the InSession Film, and I'm wearing the Star Wars version, the Star Wars font of our logo, right now, in honor of James Earl Jones, of course. So, you can help us out by checking out our swag. If you go to InSessionFilm.com/store, you'll see all of the stuff we have available there. Or you can go straight to TeePublic. That's where we host all of our stuff. So go to tpublic.com/stores/InSessionFilm. And we got all kinds of logos, designs available that you can get in t-shirts, that you can get on mugs, magnets, stickers, whatever your cup of tea is there. But we have a ton of stuff available. We have Women in Session, Chasing the Gold, of course, main show shirts. We got a Moonlight shirt. We got a Midnight Special shirt. We recently had a Dune-inspired t-shirt until Warner Brothers was like, nope, we're not having that anymore. They took that down. I don't know why. We love you, Warner Brothers. We just don't love your leadership.
No, it's a very different thing. Very different thing. Good content, bad overseeing.
Exactly. At any rate, we have all kinds of fun things up there.
Yeah.
And I'm always trying to mock up new stuff as well. Again, I wish I had more time. I would love to do more of it. But we have a bunch of stuff up there that you can go and check out. And we hope you love it. We really do. And it really helps us out a lot. So again, InSessionFilm.com/store or go to TeePublic. That's TeePublic.com/stores/InSessionFilm. And anyone that buys anything from us, be sure to tag us on social media. We want to see you with your InSession Film swag, and we certainly thank you for your support.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to move on to the next topic here. Another hard right turn. Let's talk about another controversial topic. Let's dig into Harry Potter, shall we? Let's dig into Harry Potter. Because they have announced a new open casting call for the leads of this new Harry Potter series that is indeed happening. They are planning to begin shooting next year. So unless something major happens, and I guess it could, this is happening. And they're currently looking for the new Harry Potter as we speak. So I've been somewhat waiting for this because on one hand, there is, again, the controversy that surrounds Harry Potter, but there's also the artistry of it and the adaptation. And that's the element that I'm honestly most excited to talk about here because J.K. Rowling continues to dig herself further and further into a hole that
she's becoming the best comedian working today right now.
She's absolutely awful in terms of her politics. I do not agree with anything that woman has to say at all. And it is making this extremely difficult to root for. And I wish that she would just keep her mouth shut, but she won't because it's J.K. And it kind of blows my mind. She's created this iconic, legendary franchise that rakes in millions and millions and millions and hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
All you have to do is be quiet and live your life, and
make your money.
you have no worries at all. But instead, she has to open her mouth, and now she's completely split her fan base down the middle, where a lot of people aren't even willing to engage in the art anymore because of her politics. And I do not blame anyone for
sure.
that. If they have completely disregarded JK and Harry Potter as a result of her politics, I wholly empathize and understand with those that are doing that.
Yeah.
So there's the controversy of it. But even if actually, I guess before we get into that, I did see this discourse on social media, and I think they make a great point, because there was some talking points about the kids that are going to be cast. And they're going to be young, of course, when they begin.
Yeah.
And these kids are going to be thrust immediately into controversy. And I do feel bad for these kids that will eventually be cast, because it won't be their fault. And yet there's going to be a lot of negativity around this project simply because of JK.
Well, and not even just that, but there is a real talking point, even more so now than ever before, about the way that child stars have been treated over the years, whether it be on Nickelodeon. There's even a new Hulu movie coming out, being hosted. I don't know if it's directed by her, but I know it's hosted by Demi Lovato, and she talks to many child stars over the years and what they had to endure. It's a tough business for them. So the ethics of bringing new people into this when they may not even be ready, what's that vetting process going to be to make sure that they're safe? And that's a really serious question we need to think about.
Yeah, I completely agree. When you consider fandoms and how divisive and toxic they are, for the lack of a better term, it's not going to be pretty by any stretch of the imagination. These kids will endure criticism that, again, is not their fault, simply because of how fandoms are. We simply saw this, we saw this recently, and these aren't necessarily kids, but they're still young actors with the new Star Wars show that was on Disney Plus. People absolutely destroyed them and that show simply because of the politics that divide the Star Wars fan base right now. And that was inevitable. It doesn't matter how good that show was. It could have been and/or great, and they still would have endured that hatred online.
Yeah, that's fair.
And again, not children, but young enough that it's still, again, it's not great.
Yeah.
These kids will be, 12 years old?
I thought the casting said 9 to
13?
11.
9 to 11? Yeah. Because they're 11 when they go to Hogwarts for their first year, I believe.
Yeah.
So somewhere in that age range, these are going to be young kids. My son is about to turn 9.
So basically, your son could be cast as Harry Potter if he wanted to.
Imagine he gets cast as Harry Potter and he goes through that first season and it comes out and people are going crazy about his performance or whatever, simply because the fan base doesn't know how to be adults.
Yeah.
I mean, it's insane, but that's the world that we live in. So that alone, even if you remove JK, although you can't completely remove JK out of the equation,
because that does feed into the toxic narrative in a way. Yeah. So because that has divided the audiences and created a toxic mentality that does spur into what you're talking about, for sure.
Yeah. The fandom is so split that it's going to leave open for a lot of that conversation that these kids will, it won't, there's nothing they can do about it. Yeah. And I can only imagine how they are going to respond. Whoever is cast in these roles, I pray to every God there is that their parents and their support system completely shades them from the online discourse. They never see a word of it.
They're going to need to live in some type of bunker or something like that afterwards. And the big reason why, and this is maybe where we can get into the artistic side of this conversation, even though we've already talked about this before, I don't think our stances have really changed. But the question I still have is, what is the point of this series? Who is this for? And that question I still think lingers on the minds of a lot of people. And that alone is going to further add or add more fuel to this fire, this toxic fire that you're talking about. So the artistic reasons being so questionable, I feel like, are only going to make matters worse than they already are. And that's the thing that also scares me. And I ask myself this. I still don't know the point of this series. I
is
don't
it
get
contractual? Is it the same as the Marvel and DC contracts, and that Warner Brothers has to do something within a certain time frame or they lose the rights to Harry Potter? Is that part of it?
I mean, that would make sense. But then I mean, I think we would say the same thing. If that is the case, then really do something new and unique with the material that makes it seem like you're justifying its existence. So like I'm not saying this is what it should have been, but here's a hypothetical scenario. If you have to hold on to the rights for the Harry Potter franchise and you want to do a series, what if you made it animated or something like that? That's at least something new and different. But like from what I'm hearing, I feel, and based on the teaser that we got with the logo that announced that this series is coming out, still utilizing John Williams' classic theme, it doesn't seem like it's doing anything to disassociate.
They're really going to do that? They're going to use John Williams for this?
I don't know. Well, I mean, like the tag for it that they announced that this was coming some months ago still utilized John Williams' theme. So I don't know if that means the original theme is going to be tied to this series or not. But if it is, like, how do you disassociate this from being its own thing as opposed to a very highly successful film franchise? Like,
it's a great question. When it comes to the contract, I do wonder if the Fantastic Beasts movies make up for the gap in terms of Harry Potter and that specific storyline, because Fantastic Beasts obviously is in this world, and there's been enough movies recently that there hasn't been enough of a time gap to warrant a contract dispute, I would imagine, unless Harry Potter separately is its own entity within the contract. But I don't know. I honestly don't know.
I understood it as now being all tied to this overarching wizarding world is sort of how they lumped everything together, including both the Harry Potter films and Fantastic Beasts.
It might not be a time thing then. It simply could come down to them wanting to do something for the financial gain of it. And I understand why they would make that choice, because Harry Potter will absolutely rake in money.
I mean, it will. So if that's the justification, that's sad that that's the justification, even though I understand it. The only other reason as to why I can not defend, but will speculate as to why this is being made is that it's trying to cater to the book purists, the ones that want to see every ounce of these books adapted to some type of other medium.
And that's the difference, because this being a television series, instead of the movies, you can do one season per book, and you can get into a lot of the minutia that the films obviously just don't have time to go into.
For sure.
So you can artistically make this very different from the movies. And from an adaptation perspective, which is, again, because I don't love JK's politics, the controversy of it is extremely frustrating. But that's where this part of the conversation gets interesting to me.
Sure. Okay.
Because I have gone through the books twice now. And while I love the films with Daniel Radcliffe and that crew, fantastic, especially once you get to Azkaban and you move further. Every single one of them are good to one degree.
Some degree or another. Yeah, for sure.
And I love them. However, some of them are quite different from the books. And honestly, even if you look at Harry from an overarching perspective, he is honestly very different in the movies than he is in the books. And I think there's an interesting, very interesting opportunity here for them to create a very different Harry in this TV series, which is perhaps
That's fair.
where, from an artistic adaptation perspective, you could get distinctive here. And maybe to your point of like, who is this for? Maybe this is the root of the vision from an artistic point of view. Because Harry, once you get to Order of the Phoenix and into Half-Blood Prince, I don't know how else to say this politely. He's a bit of an asshole. He really
is. You're right.
He's a dick a lot of the time.
Yeah.
He really.
There are times that Daniel Radcliffe tapped into that, but it felt a bit more passive when compared to how it's done in the books.
Absolutely. And I would love to see this series challenge audiences. And I don't know if they'd be willing to do it, because again, we're talking about Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers right now, the leadership group is creatively bankrupt. They have absolutely no idea what they're doing, obviously. But if they get the right people in there and they give them the green light and they let these creatives really dig into the nuances of the character, I would love to see that, because he is not at all how we see him in the movies. And I love Daniel Radcliffe's performances. I love the emotional foundation of him in the movies, and that's what they lean into mostly, which I do love. But here's an opportunity for you to give us a prickly Harry Potter, and that's how he is in the last 3 books. He is a dick. He is not nice to people sometimes, and it's because he's a young person who has gone through this traumatic event, and he's trying to figure out what's true and what isn't. And he's
got a huge burden and he can't deal with it.
There's a huge burden. It's cast upon him. It's not something he asked for. He wants out of it. And I love
so he
that
takes it out on
book,
other people, as many kids would, because they don't know how to process those feelings.
Exactly. And I love that he is prickly in the books. I love those complications. I think it makes the character fascinating. But there are many times in those last 3 books where you look at Harry and go, come on, man, relax. It's okay. Like, he really comes down on Hermione at times. He certainly comes down on Ron.
Yeah.
And others around him. Like, even as these others are making sacrifices for the larger goal, at times he still just doesn't. He's a kid. And I love that naivete really comes through in the book. He, like, for all of the maturity that comes with him at times, he's equally naive and equally volatile emotionally. And he does thrash out at others. Yeah. And I would love to see that in this series.
As we're talking here, the real thing that's going to spark my curiosity is if the right talent is involved here. And as we're talking about that, I wanted to look up, has a showrunner, has an executive producer been selected for this series yet? And it looks like it has.
Okay.
It looks like it has. And it looks like it's the duo Francesca Gardner and Mark Mylod, who have signed up as writer and director, with Gardner serving as showrunner. And these are the 2 people that were the brains behind the show Succession, also on Max, which I've heard really good things about. And if I remember correctly, Mark Mylod, wasn't he the director of The Menu from last year?
I think so, yeah.
I think he was. So if that's the case, and if they're going to retain that artistic ethos that already defines them, this could seem really different then, if that is the case. It could be a very corporate Harry Potter film. Maybe no magic whatsoever. Instead, Hogwarts is like a law firm or something like that.
Yeah, no, that is fascinating. That does give me a little bit of hope. But again, we've seen Warner Brothers bring in talent and then completely write them off in the end, right? Like, undermine the creative process. So I want to see Warner Brothers let these people do what they're good at. And let's assume, for the sake of the conversation, that Warner Brothers keeps their hands out of the cookie jar.
Yeah.
And they let these showrunners, directors have their say based off of those individuals you listed there, that does give me a little bit of hope that this could be quite different from the movies, because the books offer a lot that the films, simply for the sake of time. I think in terms of film adaptation, the movies did a great job, but the books have more narrative, more story to manifest. And I think this series, if done properly, could really tap into that in a new way. And I would love to see them take on those more challenging aspects like we see with Harry. I don't know if you necessarily need to get into Hermione and all of the spew stuff. I think that is morally and ethically gray. And given JK's politics, I don't think that would help matters much. So you can still remove that. But
I mean, yeah, if you adapt everything that took place in the book, The Order of the Phoenix, you would basically have like a 50-episode season, because there's so much that happens in that book.
Yeah, I think there's still going to be elements that you can remove, and I would certainly take that one out of the equation. But there's still challenging aspects in all of the books that we haven't seen visually yet that this series could tap into. And I'd be curious to see what that is. I would love for them to really delve into that. But my question is, would they be willing to do that? And if they did, how will audiences respond? Let's say they do make Harry a prick for the last 3 seasons of that series. As much as we're endeared to him and as much as we empathize with him, we also find him a bit off-putting at times, which is how he is in the books. How would audiences respond to that?
Well,
I think would be fascinating to see.
Well, it would be fascinating, but the reason why it's also very complicated here, and what makes this such a unique situation, is that you now have a third layer here, as opposed to, having book purists really upset by a certain adaptation that they didn't like. When one of their favorite books is then adapted to either a TV show or a movie, you only have one line in between two mediums tying them together. But now you technically have 3, because you have those that grew up reading the books who love the books, but then you have those who love the movies, who grew up with the movies, that may never have read any of the books. So then
which was
you've
me
got
for a long time.
Yeah, but like, you're one of the few that probably falls into both categories now. But the thing is, you have another layer of fandom in between an already existing layer of fandom, and now you're going to adapt this for the 3rd time, which means so many people are going to find themselves at war with how these characters are perceived once again. So to some, if this is a very faithful adaptation of the books, then it's not a faithful adaptation for the movies if you only have the movies to gravitate towards. And it's a really interesting conundrum then.
Yes, which under ideal circumstances, I would welcome those complexities.
Sure.
But when we live in
I'm not
a
saying I don't
world-
want that. It's just a very different kind of thing here.
Well, I think the danger of what you're talking about there is that will absolutely, in addition to JK's politics, be the root of all of the obtuse discourse that will come out of it. Because people don't know how to be adults, and they don't know how to separate those things, and they will go onto their Twitter and cry because it's not what I want.
I often say, every time I look in the mirror, I take pride thinking that I'm only still like 17 or 18 years old. But then when stories like this happen, I want to completely just revert back and course correct myself on that statement.
And look, let me be clear. I am distinguishing between trolls on social media and legit criticism.
Yeah.
Legit criticism, perfectly welcome.
It's perfectly
and
fine, but yeah, you're
That's fine.
separating that. You're separating that from those who are usually the loudest people in the room.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
sadly,
That's not what I'm talking about here. Like, if you have issues with the writing and the performances or the adaptation, whatever the issue may be, which I think in terms of a comparison, the Lord of the Rings show on Amazon, when that came out 2 years ago, whenever that first season came out, I don't even remember, time escapes me. But that first season of Rings of Power, I thought was very messy. It had nothing to do with how I felt about the performers. I wasn't trying to cry over the adaptation. It's not what Lord of the Rings is.
It
like
just
that
wasn't
was never
a very good show.
It wasn't a great show.
It's kind of like, let's go back to Star Wars, for instance. I was not a fan of The Acolyte, but that's simply because I just didn't think it was a very well-made show. It had nothing to do with everything else outside of what people were sadly
Yes.
gravitating towards. It's a very different
Exactly.
critical analysis, and that's
And there's a difference between that perspective and having legit criticism, and many people did.
yeah,
Whereas the loudest voices when it came to that, though, unfortunately, it wasn't the Brendans of the world. It was
No.
the people that wanted to cry about. the
Sadly, our
politics and-
perspectives are just not marketable.
Yeah, well, clearly. And, you know, people just want to go online and cry and bitch and complain. And that, unfortunately, becomes what is most loud.
Yeah.
And I absolutely foresee that being the same thing with this new Harry Potter series, whatever
Oh,
that
will
is.
be. Yeah. Yeah. There's
Yeah.
a danger.
It wouldn't
of
be
ruin.
like, if people have legit issues with it, that's fine. We can talk about those. That's a fun conversation we can have. We do that all the time here on the show, and many other film podcasts do the same as well.
Yeah.
But when you go online and all you want to do is cry because it's not your Harry Potter, you know, that's a completely separate thing. And I just have no bandwidth for that these days.
Oh, it's exhausting. It's exhausting
very
right
exhausting.
right out of the gate. It really is. I hope the show's interesting. I just hope it's different. I hope it has its own voice. That's all I want
agree.
to see. Yeah.
I will say, though, I feel terrible for whoever has to follow John Williams. I assume that they're going to come up with a different musical rendition for whatever for the score in general. I don't think it'll be the same theme. Maybe same-ish melodies. Maybe they want to create the same kind of ambiance. But I don't know how you follow John Williams. I don't know how you distinct it enough. Like, I mean, good luck, I guess.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm so curious about that. Unless,
Yeah.
I mean, he himself, John Williams, is at a certain age. He won't do it. He's obviously not going to score it. But if he were at a younger age, hypothetically speaking, I could see this going a similar direction as, you know, with DreamWorks doing the live action adaptation of How to Train Your Dragon coming out, I think next year. So many people who are now
that's
cast
also
for that.
gonna be- yeah.
Oh yeah, but so many people who have been cast for that film, and they're apparently wrapping up filming, I think, as we speak. They've all been saying this is its own thing. It's unique. And it's like, yeah, but we're also bringing back John Powell. We're also bringing back Gerard Butler. We're also bringing back
Yeah.
Dean DeBlois, who directed the animated movie. So yeah, it's still
Exactly.
its own thing. Bullshit. It's like, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's like, but like we'll know for sure if they try to bring back John Williams's theme for this series. I think that'll be a huge tell as
Yeah.
to what this direction is.
You know, I will say, and maybe it's simply because I'm a fan of the movies, and maybe this is somewhat in contradiction to what we were just talking about in terms of make it distinct, make it different, make it unique. Narratively, characterization, storytelling, yes. In some ways, though, I'm kind of okay if they just regurgitate the whole thing aesthetically. The robes,
Well,
maybe even
yeah.
the music. I'd
Well,
kind of be okay with that because
know.
I
It'd be
loved
a
it so
really-
much.
I mean, it would be a really weird experiment. It would take me back to when Gus Van Sant did the Psycho remake in 1998.
Sure, okay.
Just do a shot-for-shot remake with different
Shot
people.
for
How about
shot,
that?
Like, I mean, I don't know. Like, you have all of the renditions there in front of you because of the movies, right? So, and,
Sure.
and whatever practical sets you used, it's all there as well. So, I don't know if they're going to regurgitate those. I don't know if they want to follow suit, but in terms of the robes, the way it all looks visually, if it was similar to the movies, I wouldn't mind that as much. I'm honestly more concerned about the characters, their interactions, the storytelling, because to me, because of the books, there's so much more to mine there that if that's what they wanted to focus on and spend less time on, well, what do we want this to look like? I'd be okay with that, especially if they land the story part of it.
As long as whether it be tonally or in mood, theme, whatever it is, as long as it feels like its own thing in some way. It can look like the movies. It can look like the same thing. But if I still feel like it has its own identity in some way,
Yeah.
then but that's the thing. It's like we're not that far removed from this series, even though we are. I mean, the first movie came out over 20 years ago, but it was a 10-year series. It lasted for 10 years. It ended less than 15 years ago.
Yeah.
That's kind of a tight gap when you really think about it in that way.
Well, by the time this comes out, there will be a 15-year window between the last movie and this series. Is that enough or is it not? I don't know.
And you know, that's the interesting thing, because we've seen even tighter gaps than that before that have worked, but those circumstances were very different. The first one I think of, okay, we technically had 3 different people play Spider-Man in less than 10 years. But, you know, the Andrew Garfield films, say what you will about him, I think he was great as Spider-Man, but those films were not great. They were at least not well received, so that made more excitement for a new iteration of Spider-Man, especially given the circumstances of the MCU. So there are ways that tight gap could have worked. I just don't know if this is the one, because that film series is still, to this day, isn't it the most profitable film series of all time?
I think so. It's up there.
They're legendary. They really are. They are hit movies, and they are mostly all great movies. I mean, we talk about this a lot. Back in the 2000s, there was a different era of blockbuster filmmaking that has aged beautifully now, and the Harry Potter films are also part of that conversation, right? They really are.
Yeah. And I don't think that, you know, while the fan base is obviously very fervent in their love for Harry Potter, however, I do think perhaps they want to avoid the Amazon Lord of the Rings fiasco, because Amazon paid a lot of money for the rights to do that show. Yeah. And then it essentially bombs. It does not do very well. Yeah. They're committing to the 5 seasons. I honestly didn't even know season 2 was coming out. That's how little I feel like this show has been talked about.
I know. I hear it's better. I hear it's better, though, which is at least a good thing.
But even since it's been released, I haven't seen much of it on my timeline. I don't know how many people are seeing this. I haven't seen a lot of discourse for it. And if you make a Harry Potter show and it's not great, let's say it's really bad, as rabid as that fan base is, will they tune out the same way? Maybe. And I think Warner Brothers wants to avoid that. So I do think they're going to try to put at least some creative juices into this. I would hope so anyway.
They've seen it firsthand now with the Lord of the Rings, the Rings of Power, as you're talking about. They've seen it not work before. So the danger of it not working is in their line of sight. They understand it. Hopefully they understand it. And you talk about the rabid fan base of the Harry Potter franchise. It doesn't seem to be as vocal for the Lord of the Rings. So like imagine that type of failure, but for Harry Potter, it would be exponentially worse. It really would be.
Yeah. And I kind of wonder if you really risk the conversation going the other way, because I was just noting there, I haven't seen much in terms of the conversation around the Rings of Power season 2. People simply aren't talking about it from what I can tell. I think with Harry Potter,
people lost interest.
Not only would, like, if Harry Potter, this series, let's say, is as bad or worse than that first season for the Ring of Power, I don't think people are going to sit idle. I don't think there's going to be a lack of discourse the way there might be right now for the Rings of Power. I think people will take that energy and they're going to, again,
they won't shut up.
They're gonna create a lot of negative.
There will be a documentary made on the fandom if that happens.
It's gonna be. I think it'll be wild. I don't think people are just gonna sit around and just not talk about it.
Well, I mean, here's the thing: it'll be so loud and vocal, it might actually end up profiting the show that they could make a season 2 then.
Yeah,
if it is.
I mean, because right now Amazon might be sitting there going, well, it's not the hit we thought it would be, but people are, at least there's not a lot of negative conversation at the moment. maybe they're getting a little lucky with it.
They at least have an opportunity to make it better.
They do.
Yeah.
And maybe win people back.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't, people are not going to be quiet about Harry Potter. I think it'll be loud.
It'll be very loud.
For sure. All right. Well, it'll be interesting to see how that evolves, but I want to see an asshole Harry Potter. That's my final word on the moment. I want them to really lean into him being a dick.
I'd love to see that. That'd be pretty fine.
Would be. You mentioned Spider-Man a moment ago. I guess we can talk about that as well, because it was announced that Dustin Daniel Cretton is going to be directing Spider-Man 4. So it does seem as if they're veering in a slightly different direction here for the next one. I'm curious what you think about what this could be or mean for the MCU.
I really don't know. I'll say this. I think he's a more interesting director choice than John Watts ever was, even though and while I didn't fully see Destin Daniel Cretton's usual sensibilities in Shang-Chi, I think he still helped spearhead a very exciting MCU film. That was certainly one of the more exciting MCU films we got post-Endgame. And I'm sure he can bring a similar type of energy, and certainly a more psychological energy that he's known for, especially when you look at films like Short Term 12, and say what you will about The Glass Castle, it at least tries to engage in serious conversations that I think could fit the world of specifically a street level Spider-Man movie, which is ultimately what I want to see, and where I feel like No Way Home was setting things up. I think a very limited street level film would get me intrigued by having Destin Daniel Cretton behind the camera. It really depends on where Sony / Marvel Studios wants to take this story, because I have heard rumblings that this will be yet another grand multiversal story. And if that's the case, it honestly, it doesn't even really matter who the director is for me. That's just a story I don't really want to see again. Even though I do understand how Spider-Man himself will probably play some type of crucial role in the events of Avengers Doomsday and Secret Wars, I don't think you necessarily need that to occur as a primary point in another Spider-Man film. I think we need something very limited. And I would love to see Destin Daniel Cretton tackle those sensibilities for it, as opposed to find himself exploring the multiversal world once again, because I don't think Spider-Man's not really ultimately about that as a character, especially when we look back at the comics.
Sure.
I want to see the smaller scale once again. So it really just depends on where they want to go with it.
Well, I think what's interesting about this news is, well, it's kind of twofold. One, Destin Daniel Cretton on his own, I do think is an interesting choice. I do like his movies, especially Short Term 12. Excellent film. One of the best films of 2013. Yeah. Just Mercy, good. The Glass Castle, I liked enough. Shang-Chi, I really liked. I thought it was one of the better elements of Phase 4. So I do think he's a director that could, to your point, take the Spider-Man sensibilities that make him the grounded New York superhero that we know and love, which Marvel has touted that is or was going to be the new direction for Spider-Man. We're going to take him away from the larger MCU vision, and we're going to put him on the streets. That's what we were told. Yeah. And Destin Daniel Cretton, I think, is a good choice for that.
Sure.
However, he was also tapped, speaking of Cretton, was tapped to do Avengers King Dynasty. That was supposed to be his next movie. Yeah. So he's no longer doing that. Obviously, the MCU have shifted their priorities. So instead of doing that, now he's doing Spider-Man. Does that mean that they want to take some of what he was going to do for King Dynasty and veer those plans into Spider-Man, which will then lead to some of the bigger things in the MCU? I could see that also being the case, because what have we talked about here? How are we going to get from where we're at now in the MCU to Doom. Like there's so little in between what we have currently on the slate to where we're getting with these huge MCU or huge Avengers movies, in a few years. There's not much that gets us from A to Z. Not much at all. So how are we going to articulate the expansiveness, the pressing of the gas pedal to these large MCU Avengers battles? How are we going to explain that if there's no other movies in between? Well, we have Spider-Man 4. And that could be a character that helps fill in those gaps. I could absolutely see that being the case, especially since Cretton was supposed to be Avengers King Dynasty, and that was going to be a huge piece of the puzzle, obviously. But since that's not happening, maybe we take some of those ideas and we put them into Spider-Man 4.
Wow. What if your speculation there actually predicts the title for Spider-Man 4? Spider-Man, the Kang Dynasty.
I don't know if there'll be that on the nose, but
I don't think there'll be that on the nose either. I was being very facetious with that comment, but I think you make a good point that maybe he was tapped because this is ultimately maybe not necessarily the direction that they want to go with Spider-Man, but maybe it's the direction that they feel obligated to go with Spider-Man in order to tie this together. So him coming on is not necessarily for his sensibilities for the character of Spider-Man, but for how they can use what he was working on as a fusion for this.
I think that might be the case here.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if I want to see that because I would love to see a Tom Holland street level Spider-Man film. I've even heard other rumors that, with Venom: The Last Dance coming out later this year, which admittedly I'm actually really excited for. I think this movie looks awesome. But I've heard theories, so I wouldn't even call them rumors. They're really more theories about how this could ultimately happen. That the ending of that movie and how it's meant to crystallize the Venom trilogy is by ultimately bringing that iteration of Eddie Brock into the sacred timeline, and how that could play into that. Because apparently it has been revealed that Null is going to be, if not the big bad of The Last Dance, but certainly an overarching presence. And Null is apparently pretty crucial to the trajectory of how we can get to Secret Wars. So there is a potential through line that could be mined from that as far as I understand it. So I'll simply say this. I think I'd rather see that than seeing whatever they're going to try and do with Kang to build it over to, this whole doomsday thing. Really, if ultimately this just comes down to the fact that I'm still very sore about Robert Downey Jr. coming back as Doom. This whole thing is just got me so concerned. I don't really trust anything Marvel's doing right now, but I really would just love to see a very simple Spider-Man movie with him, one villain on the streets of New York, treat New York like a character, keep it simple. That's it. That's all I want to see.
Yep, you are right. Null was a high-ranking member of one of the religious sects that was involved with the Skrulls, and she was a big part of Secret Invasion. That is absolutely true. Okay. So that would tie into the larger plans of the MCU if that is indeed the case. Now, I did hear that news that the character was cast, but I don't know anything beyond that. I don't know if Marvel has announced that she was going to be a major player in one of these upcoming movies. I honestly don't know either. That part.
Yeah. But there's no news or anything. Yeah.
The character being being introduced now makes a lot of sense to me. That I do think is appropriate. So I am curious about how that tie-in works. And does that mean that Venom eventually makes its way into Spider-Man 4? I could see that being the case. I don't know if Sony is planning to do any more solo Venom movies after this trilogy concludes.
I don't think they are. I think they're treating this as a conclusion.
Yeah, and that certainly makes a lot of sense. I've enjoyed the Venom movies. Tom Hardy is the best. He's having a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's the thing. I don't I'm not sure if I've enjoyed the Venom movies. I didn't hate the second one because it at least leaned into the Eddie Brock Venom dynamic.
It's absurd. Yeah.
Yeah, it is, but at least it knows it's absurd, so I appreciate that.
I agree.
This third one looks like it's even more of a heightened version of the thing I want to see from these movies, which is why I'm excited for it. But if this is going to be a conclusion, I don't mind it being a conclusion for just these movies, because I actually wouldn't mind seeing Tom Hardy's Eddie Brock have more to do in some way. I don't mind that. As long as it serves the story and makes sense and it's right.
I agree. I agree. I mean, and we all know that Venom is such a crucial piece to the Spider-Man story that I could see Marvel wanting, by Marvel, I mean the MCU, wanting them to include Venom in the MCU in some way, like bringing him in, letting him fight or interact with Tom Holland's Spider-Man in some way, shape, or form. I do think that's something they want to do. Maybe they're waiting for this last dance to come out in theaters before they move forward with that.
Best movie title ever.
I can't wait. I can't wait for it, but I'm curious what they do with Spider-Man because I am a bit conflicted here. And
Same.
I don't know what the hiring of Cretton means. I really don't. If we are moving toward the street level stuff, I mean, that's what I want, and I'd be very excited for that.
Honestly, if we're gonna go street level, or we're going to go any direction that brings other well-known characters outside of just Spider-Man and whoever villain he's going to fight, then bring Daredevil in. Like that's that.
I want to see that too.
Fun. Yeah,
I want to see that too, and I believe that series comes out next year, right?
I believe so. Daredevil Born Again
comes out next year. I think that's when that comes out. I don't suspect we'll see Spider-Man in that at all.
I don't think we will. No.
I am very excited for that series, and maybe it will set up the idea that Spider-Man and Daredevil could collaborate.
Sure.
Especially because they now know each other. We know that, right?
Well,
so because of the cameo of Daredevil.
Well, they know each other, but they also don't, right?
Yeah, exactly. But it's okay. Let me rephrase. That cameo lives in that film for a reason, right? One would think.
At least you would assume so.
You would assume that they are going to come together at some point. And Spider-Man going street level and interacting with Daredevil, given the cameo, I think that's where it was going to go. But with Destin Daniel Cretton now coming into the fold, I don't know. I wonder if they want to bring Kang, some of those bigger plans into Spider-Man 4. I just wonder. We'll see. I guess we'll see.
They could go like I'm trying to think of a good example here. They could go the Spectre route, where they just like kill that whole thing off in the first 5 minutes and then completely disregard it.
I really hope not. Really hope not. I mean, I don't think that'll work. There's lots of things to like about Spectre. That was not one of them.
Yeah. Well, I guess actually I meant No Time to Die. Where that complete disregard for Spectre came into play.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess we'll see on that. We'll find out if the MCU wants to go that route, or if I do think it will connect in some way to the larger aspect. And Spider-Man is too big of a character. It's going to get people into the seats. And I think there could be a major pivot point there.
Yeah, we'll see.
But maybe you're right. Maybe that's where but maybe the reversal of No Time to Die, in the sense that most of the film is the street level stuff, but then the last 15 minutes is, here's the larger part of the MCU that we would need to connect. And they kind of do the reversal of it.
Yeah, it's like all of a sudden it's a small movie until it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's Daredevil and Spider-Man going around causing havoc, and then in the last 15 minutes a giant spaceship shows up in New York again. Like,
yeah,
that's
giant spaceship
probably what's
shows up,
gonna happen.
and then like Hugh Jackman and and everyone,
Yeah,
Patrick Stewart come out, and
the X-Men show up. That's how we're introduced to the X-Men. Oh my god.
at this point
Who-
now, the best thing
crazy.
that we can do is because everyone's speculating and theorizing about how the X-Men are going to be introduced into the MCU. At this point
Yeah.
now, the best thing that Marvel can do is just randomly throw them in and take everybody off guard.
Yeah. That's what I would do. Yeah. Just
Yeah.
have them show up randomly
Yeah.
at the end of a Spider-Man movie. That's
Yeah,
that's
there
the
you
way
go.
to do it there. Okay. I guess as we wind down here, I want to talk about the Toronto International Film Festival.
Oh,
So the People's Choice Award was announced earlier today as we are recording this.
Mhm.
And The Life of Chuck ends up winning the People's Choice Award,
Yeah.
which was a little bit of a surprise because when the reviews came out, the general consensus was that was a good movie. That was a crowd pleaser. We really enjoyed that. Is it
Mhm.
going to be nominated for an Oscar? Probably not. That was a lot of the consensus that I read.
Yeah. I think
Mike
the early
Flanagan doing a non-horror movie.
Yeah,
His
another
first
Stephen King adaptation, though.
Stephen King
so-
adaptation, but non-horror, and the cast is really great. I heard nothing but great things about it, and we even had a review on our website saying that it was Mike Flanagan's masterpiece that you can go and check out at InSessionFilm.com. So people were really high on the movie, but I didn't see much in terms of Oscars prospects.
Mhm, mhm.
However, and we talked about this last year with American Fiction because there was a similar narrative around that movie as well.
Yeah.
And that it wins the People's Choice, but I don't know about its Oscar prospects. Now, obviously, that film went on to get a Best Screenplay, not just nomination, but
But a win. Yeah.
and it was nominated for Best Picture. So The Life of Chuck has a bit of a uphill battle here because the last film to not be nominated for Best Picture was 2011, I believe, right? Where Do We Go Now? I think that was the last one to miss.
I think
If I'm not
so. But,
mistaken.
but history has been pretty kind to movies that end up winning the People's Choice Award at the Toronto International Film Festival, as far as movies that would eventually get a Best Picture nomination at the very least.
Yeah,
so I think,
that's what I
Yeah.
mean. Like, it's been
Yeah.
a long time. The last time the People's Choice Award winner missed a nomination for Best Picture, if I'm not mistaken, was 2011.
I
So
think
it's
it
been
was.
a while. There's a
And
long
many-
streak going.
and many films that would go on to win the People's Choice would also go on to win Best Picture at the Oscars if
12
that
Years
year
a
was right.
Slave.
Green Book, Nomadland,
Book,
The King's Speech, Slumdog Millionaire, American Beauty, Chariots of Fire. So I've
La
got
La
the
Land
deadline.
for about 3 seconds.
Yeah, La La Land for about 3 seconds. Yeah, but I've got the deadline article in front of me, so I have these reference points for me. But even so, movies that would go on to win People's Choice that would at least get a Best Picture nomination at the Oscars, there are a lot.
There's a lot.
of
Yeah. And especially in recent history.
absolutely.
Again, the
yeah.
last film to miss was 2011. So it's been a long time.
Yeah, it's been 13 years. That's a big gap.
There's a big gap. So on one hand, I'm interested in The Life of Chuck to see if it can, just like American Fiction, if it can get over those hurdles or people's reservations, their dubiousness, and get into a Best Picture lineup. That's one thing. And again, I'm basing that strictly off the reviews and the reaction of really good, crowd pleasing, fun. I don't know if it's Oscar worthy.
Yeah, I think it's sitting at it only has a few reviews right now, but I think on Metacritic it scores somewhere around 60 something. So it's in the positive realm, but it's still early yet.
It's still early.
Could
Yeah.
develop a fan base even from critics as it goes on.
Yeah, I'm generalizing, but that was the consensus reaction. The other wrinkle here, though, is that currently, as we are recording this, it has no distribution for the rest of the year. So unless a Searchlight comes along or a Neon, or Amazon. I don't know.
I don't know. I was
Someone
gonna
needs
say
to rescue this film.
it seems like a Neon would want to jump on this just based on their history, their track record, this filmmaker, the types of films that he has made, and the types of films that Neon has distributed over the past few months. I could see Mike Flanagan joining forces with Neon on this one.
Yeah.
I don't know that for sure. It's just speculative at this point. But you're right. It's kind of in limbo until until it has a push in the right direction.
Yeah, I'm really curious where that film lands this award season. I imagine Shadon and Erica are going to talk about this
Yeah.
on Chasing the Gold very soon, but I am curious how, what that means for this movie.
Mhm.
And maybe that simply means this will be the first film to miss in
Maybe
13 years.
and
I
might
don't
just
know.
come down to those circumstances. I think what's also interesting around this too is, we look at the People's Choice Award winner being The Life of Chuck. You have the first runner-up being Amelia Perez, and the second runner-up being Sean Baker's Honora, the Palme
Yeah.
d'Or winning Honora
Yeah.
from Cannes. And I think the last time that happened, a runner-up that also won at the Cannes Film Festival was Parasite. The
Look how
Bong
well
Joon-ho.
that turned out.
So does this
Yeah.
mean we already have our Best Picture frontrunner with Honora? I almost
I think
feel
so.
like
I think it's
yeah.
very much in the conversation.
Yeah.
No doubt about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, whether it is the front runner, I don't know, but certainly in the top three. I think Honora is right up there for sure.
I think so too.
I think maybe it's a little too early to tell with The Life of Chuck, but here's the thing. It's very possible this film doesn't come out till next year. This might be a 2025 film in terms of the awards conversation.
Maybe.
That is in the
Maybe.
realm of possibility. So I don't know until we find out who the distribution is going to be, and how much are they going to put into it in terms of resources. I guess all of that is up in the air. But I thought that was interesting. I thought that was an interesting choice because
I think so too.
Honestly, I did not expect it. I haven't seen the film, but a lot of people were talking about like the life of Chuck was certainly in the conversation, but I always saw it kind of lower on people's lists as far as predicted winners for TIFF. So that was a little bit of a surprise, like American Fiction was last year.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Sometimes
That
I
makes
wonder,
me excited to see it, though.
how does Mike Flanagan do it all? Like, he actually
I don't
seems
know.
like he's the busiest man in the business, just in general, whether it be his films or even the many miniseries that he has
Yeah.
been tied to. And many of them, he's also not just been a series creator on, but a director of many episodes.
Yeah.
In some cases, the full series, like Haunting of Hill House, for instance.
Yeah.
Like I don't know how he does it all. And now he's being tapped to be the new voice to add new life to the Exorcist franchise after the debauchery of David Gordon Green's take on the material. So
gosh.
I don't know how he does it. I really don't.
I don't know either. And it's interesting because he's obviously known for his horror films, but The Life of Chuck is anything but that, right? It's described as this warm and alluring movie about what it means to be alive. There's supposedly an incredible dance sequence halfway through the film that is a contender for scene of the year. Like that's how, like it's being talked about as this warm movie that has a lot of heart. That just does not sound like a film that you would expect from Mike Flanagan, and that to me is really fun. Like I can't wait to see what that means.
I say that in a way that I do agree with you, but I also think about some of the attributes where he tried to tap into that in previous properties, whether it be film or television. I mostly think of a film like Dr. Sleep, which you and I did not really care for. We did not go for that film. But I think weirdly, the best moments of that film that did work was when it did veer away from the horror, when it actually veered more in. So like the stuff that we're talking about that is apparently very successful about Life of Chuck, I feel like he has done before and it has worked. really in that example of something like Dr. Sleep, it's because it gets bogged down by the world building of an existing world that really hurts the entire property.
Yeah.
But I think the moments when it
Yeah.
does quiet down and become something more humanistic, there actually is something there. And
Yeah.
it sounds as though that's what the life of Chuck ultimately is. And Stephen King himself, I actually think his best material as a writer is when he did veer away from horror. You know, like the classic movie Stand By Me was based on a short story called The Body, which I think might be the best thing he ever wrote. I think some
Oh, wow.
some of his dramas are some of the best things he's ever done. So it sounds like the work is already there, and I think he'll be able to tap into that.
Yeah, I'm curious to see. I'm really curious to see The Life of Chuck. It does sound like a movie I'm going to love. And, you know,
Sounds like it's up our wheelhouse.
I'm really curious and maybe excited because of my experience with American Fiction last year, because a lot of people were like, yeah, good movie, great performance at the center of it. You know, but a lot of people were like, I don't know about Best Picture, you know, Best of the Year. There was a lot of reservation. And I'm not saying American Fiction needed to be in a 10. It wasn't even in my personal top 10 of that year, but it's a film I really loved. Like, I really liked it a lot. And that's the thing when it comes to awards conversation that makes me maybe a little bit nervous for The Life of Chuck, is that even if it's really good and we go for it, or it sounds like I certainly might go for it, I am a little nervous that if it does become a front runner for Best Picture, that it just gets shredded because it's up against a Nora or whatever film that people are championing for Film of the Year. That does make me a little nervous for it, but
well, I'm
we'll
looking
see.
at the cast for it now. We just got done doing our Best of the Decade awards for the 2000s, specifically in episode 600, and an actress that we talked about a lot was one that we also said, where are
I'm
they?
excited
Where have
to
they
see
been?
her in this. Yes. I
Are
know where
we
you're going.
finally getting a Koryanka Kilcher resurgence? Is that what's going to happen here?
Yeah. That's very exciting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what else I've seen her in. I know she was in Hostiles in 2017.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
You know, outside of that, I don't really know.
I think there's been some television work that I can't name offhand.
You know, I did see Color Out of Space. I think that was a Sundance film. I wanna say.
Yeah, there
Maybe
was
I'm
that.
wrong.
You're right. Yeah.
I did see that. I honestly don't recall her in that film because I was not a fan. I did not like that film very much.
Yeah.
So
I did briefly forget that she was in Dog for a brief moment, the Channing Tatum film.
oh yeah, she was in that, wasn't she?
Yeah.
Now I need to go back and revisit. That's a film I'm willing to go back to.
That was a good
I'll
movie.
look for her.
That was a good
It
movie.
is a good movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I forgot she was in that. Yeah.
Yeah. Small part,
So,
apparently.
I'm gonna pay attention to her though. I'm gonna be looking for her in The Life of Chuck.
Yeah. I
For
mean,
sure.
she should have won every award for the New World, but that's another conversation for another time.
At any rate, I think for this week's show, we'll go ahead and wind down there since we're getting a little low on time here. So just want to say real quick before we get out of here, we do have 2 reviews coming out this week. We did not see Speak No Evil because we did not want to speak about no trailer again. So
Speak
we
No
are
Trailer.
foregoing Speak No Evil. Instead, we have a couple of buddy movies that we're going to talk about. There is the documentary Will and Harper that I'm really anxious to get into. That is dropping on Netflix, I believe, this weekend as we are recording this. I want to say the week this is dropped.
Yeah.
And then we're going to talk about, and we're a little late to the party here, but we're going to talk about the indie film Snack Shack that came out earlier in the year.
Yeah.
But we
Now
both
available on
caught
Prime.
up with that one. Yep, available now on Prime. We're going to give that one a go. Very excited to talk about that one as well. So a couple of really, really interesting buddy movies we're going to talk about on for reviews this week.
Yeah. I like that theme.
Exactly. We also have a new women in session coming out. Be sure to go and check out their latest episode that dropped this last Friday. That was a ton of fun. Definitely urge people to go and check out Women in Session. Again, they'll have a new episode this week as well. And I think Shadon and Erica are doing a Chasing the Gold. I haven't confirmed with them because Shadon was at TIFF experiencing all of the funness there in Toronto. But she did note to me they wanted to do a Chasing the Gold talking about all of the award stuff and the festival stuff that has happened over the last month or so. Yeah. So they are planning to do an episode, and that will hopefully come out this week, if not next week. But that is coming as well. Yeah. So wanted to lay that out there. Of course, we want to hear from you. Let us know what your feedback is. If you agree or disagree with anything we had to say here, please leave a comment on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. If you're watching here on YouTube, you can check out the or leave a comment below. You can email us InSessionFilm@gmail.com. Brennan, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
Thanks for the birthday wishes, man. I really do appreciate it. I had a good time hanging out with the wife, some friends on Friday night. We went down to downtown Westchester, did some fun things. Just got back from dinner with my parents, too. So got to see a lot of good family, a lot of good friends. It was a good time. So I appreciate the wishes earlier in the episode as well, man.
Absolutely. Glad you had a good time.
I did. 35. For some people, this might be a midlife crisis.
Could be. I think you still have a few years to get there.
I do, but you know what I did?
Get to your midlife.
But you know what I decided to do today is watch a movie that is all about what it means getting old and how you deal with that. I watched Quentin Tarantino's Jackie Brown, and I had a very visceral reaction to it. I'll simply say.
All right. That's very exciting. I did not watch Jackie Brown, although I do really like that movie a lot. I think a film we might need to put on the list soon is the A24 film Janet Planet. I've dug the hell out of that movie. It is way more understated. We've talked about this a couple of times in recent weeks. A trailer that sells a different movie. The trailer for Janet Planet sells a different movie.
Gotcha. Okay.
It is way more understated than the trailer suggests.
Interesting.
It is a little bit quirky in the same ways that you see in the trailer, but it is very internalized, that film. Very quiet, very still movie, which is my cup of tea for those that know me.
Sounds good. Yeah. I mean, that's how you sell a movie to me as well. I'm interested.
Yeah. Methodical cinema. I am completely there. So I think that might be one we have to add to the list. So,
okay. Let's do it.
At any rate, stay tuned for the reviews this week. Let us know what you think of this episode. Do you want more Harry Potter or not? I'm curious to hear.
Burning question, isn't it?
With all that said, thanks for listening, everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on the InSession Film Podcast. Give me an asshole Harry Potter. I want it, please.